Look, I'm gonna tell you something that's happening right now in the NFL that nobody saw coming. And honestly, it's the kind of mess that makes you question everything you thought you knew about how professional football organizations operate. The Cleveland Browns are imploding, and I mean completely falling apart at the seams. And it's all centered around one player who's been sitting on the bench watching his career waste away while a struggling quarterback gets chance after chance. Shedeur Sanders is done being patient, and the New Orleans Saints just walked into this disaster with a briefcase full of draft picks ready to rescue him from what might be the most toxic quarterback situation in the league right now. Before we get into the specifics of this trade proposal that's worth over $21 million when you factor in all the moving pieces, you need to understand how we got here. This isn't just about one bad game or one frustrated backup. This is months of organizational dysfunction, coaching stubbornness, and a front office that seems completely paralyzed by their own bad decisions. The Browns drafted Shedeur in the 3rd round, and everyone watching thought they'd found something special. The kid has bloodlines, he has talent, he has confidence, and most importantly, he has that intangible quality that separates franchise quarterbacks from guys who bounce around the league for a few years before disappearing. But Kevin Stefanski made his choice, and that choice was Dillon Gabriel, and now the entire organization is paying the price for that decision. Gabriel's been struggling all season long, and I'm not talking about growing pains or the normal adjustment period that young quarterbacks go through. I'm talking about genuine, fundamental problems with his game that aren't getting better. He's missing open receivers consistently. He's throwing interceptions in the red zone at critical moments. His decision-making under pressure looks panicked and rushed. The completion percentage keeps dropping week after week. Fourth quarter performance has been absolutely abysmal, which is exactly when you need your quarterback to elevate his game. Meanwhile, Shedeur Sanders sits there on the sideline, watching all of this unfold, knowing he could do better, knowing the entire locker room thinks he should be out there, and having to keep his mouth shut because that's what backup quarterbacks are supposed to do. Except Shedeur stopped keeping his mouth shut, and that's when everything exploded into public view. There's this video that went viral, and if you haven't seen it yet, you need to understand what actually happened because the media has been spinning it in about 15 different directions. Gabriel threw another terrible interception, the kind of throw that makes you wonder how someone at this level could make that mistake, and the cameras caught Shedeur's reaction on the sideline. He turned to a teammate, shook his head with this look of complete disbelief, and you could see him say something. Lip readers confirmed he said he could have made that throw left-handed. Now, some people tried to frame this as disrespectful or immature, but let me tell you what it actually was. It was honesty. It was frustration boiling over after months of watching preventable mistakes cost the team games. It was a young quarterback who's been promised opportunities that never materialized finally reaching his breaking point and not caring who saw it. That moment became the catalyst for everything that followed. Stephen A. Smith saw the video and absolutely lost his mind on first take, slamming his desk and yelling about how Shedeur's been ready this whole time, while Gabriel looks like he doesn't belong on an NFL field. Shannon Sharpe jumped in talking about how you can see the quarterback energy radiating from Shedeur, even when he's standing still. The entire sports media apparatus seized on this story because it confirmed what everyone watching Browns games had been thinking for weeks. This team is starting the wrong quarterback, and everybody knows it except apparently the one person who matters most, which is Kevin Stefanski. While all this media chaos was happening, while Twitter was melting down and Instagram was flooded with commentary and TikTok was pushing the video to millions of people, the New Orleans Saints were making their move. They'd been watching this situation develop for months, studying Shedeur's college tape, monitoring his practice performance through their connections around the league, and waiting for the right moment to strike. That viral sideline moment was their opening. Saints general manager Mickey Loomis picked up the phone and called Cleveland's front office with a proposal that nobody expected. They offered a 2nd round pick, a 4th round pick, and additional conditional selections that could escalate based on performance metrics. When you add up the total value, including salary considerations and the draft capital involved, you're looking at a package worth more than $21 million for a backup quarterback who hasn't taken a meaningful snap all season. Think about what that means from New Orleans' perspective. They're not offering this kind of compensation on a whim or because they're desperate enough to overpay for potential. They've done their homework. Their scouting department has watched every throw Shedeur made in college. They've talked to people inside the Browns organization who've seen his work ethic and leadership qualities up close. They've analyzed his mechanics, his decision-making, his ability to read defenses, and they've concluded that Cleveland is wasting a legitimate franchise quarterback prospect. The Saints have been stuck in quarterback purgatory ever since Drew Brees retired. They tried Jameis Winston, they tried drafting guys who didn't pan out. They've been searching desperately for someone who can stabilize the position and give them a chance to compete in a tough division. Shedeur represents the answer they've been looking for, and they're willing to pay a premium to get him before some other team figures out what Cleveland is too stubborn to see. The response inside the Browns organization has been absolute chaos. Players are furious. You've got veterans who've been grinding all season trying to keep this team competitive, while the offense keeps shooting itself in the foot with turnovers and missed opportunities. These guys watch film. They see Shedeur in practice making throws that Gabriel misses in games. They know who gives them the better chance to win, and they're watching their front office consider trading that guy away while keeping the quarterback who's actively hurting their playoff chances. Multiple offensive players have gone to coaches privately expressing their frustration. One veteran anonymously told reporters that if the Browns trade Shedeur while continuing to start Gabriel, the locker room is going to completely revolt. Think about how significant that is. These are professionals who understand the business side of football, who know that management makes personnel decisions all the time, but they're so frustrated by what they're seeing that they're willing to speak out and risk the consequences. The coaching staff is divided. Some assistants reportedly believe taking the Saints' offer makes sense if Stefanski's never going to play Shedeur anyway. Why keep him on the roster just to watch him waste away when you could get significant draft capital in return? Other coaches are pushing back hard, arguing that trading Shedeur would be admitting a catastrophic failure in talent evaluation and player development. It would be publicly acknowledging that they spent a third-round pick on a quarterback they never seriously intended to develop, which raises all kinds of uncomfortable questions about how this organization makes decisions. Jimmy Haslam, the owner who's poured hundreds of millions into trying to build a winner, is reportedly furious about the entire situation. He's demanding answers about why Gabriel keeps starting despite obvious struggles, and he's forcing the front office to seriously consider whether keeping Shedeur makes sense if they're not going to use him properly. What makes the timing so critical is where the Browns are in their season. They're sitting at 2 wins and 4 losses in a division with Lamar Jackson's Ravens and Joe Burrow's Bengals. Every single game matters enormously. Their playoff window is closing fast, and Gabriel's continued struggles might cost them the entire season before November even arrives. The trade deadline is approaching rapidly, which means Cleveland has to make a decision soon. Keep Shedeur and finally give him a chance to start, which would mean admitting Stefanski was wrong all along and potentially accelerating his firing. Keep Shedeur but continue benching him, which means dealing with growing locker room frustration and eventually losing him for nothing. Or accept the Saints' offer, collect the draft picks, and risk watching Shedeur become a star somewhere else, while Gabriel continues struggling, which would go down as one of the worst trades in franchise history. League executives around the NFL are watching this situation closely because it has broader implications for how organizations handle quarterback decisions. This is a perfect example of what happens when politics and ego override performance-based evaluation, when coaches become so invested in their initial choice that they can't admit they were wrong even when the evidence is overwhelming, when ownership interference creates confusion about who's actually making personnel decisions. Cleveland has created a situation where every possible outcome looks terrible because they've mishandled things so badly for so long that there's no clean resolution anymore. For Saints fans, this trade proposal represents genuine hope after years of uncertainty at the most important position in football. They're getting a young quarterback with first-round talent at a fraction of the cost of trading up in the draft to select someone. They're rescuing him from a dysfunctional situation before his confidence gets destroyed by another season of riding the bench. They're bringing in someone who fits their offensive system perfectly with his accuracy, quick decision-making, and natural timing. If Shedeur walks into New Orleans and gets an immediate starting opportunity, he's playing with talented receivers like Chris Olave and Michael Thomas when healthy. He's operating in an aggressive passing attack that prioritizes the kind of throws he excels at making. The Saints aren't that far from being competitive if they can just solve the quarterback position, and adding Shedeur might be exactly what pushes them back into playoff contention. The wild card that nobody's talking about enough is Deion Sanders and what role he's playing behind the scenes. You know Prime is monitoring this situation constantly, talking to his son regularly, and probably working his connections throughout the league to figure out what's best for Shedeur's career. If Dayon believes New Orleans gives Shedeur a better chance to succeed than Cleveland, that opinion carries enormous weight. Shedeur respects his father's experience navigating NFL politics and his understanding of what young quarterbacks need to develop properly. Whether Dayon is encouraging him to embrace the trade possibility or to fight for his opportunity in Cleveland could determine how this whole thing plays out. The social media reaction has been absolutely relentless. For over 12 hours straight, Shedeur Sanders was the top trending topic nationally. Thousands of comments flooded in with fans dissecting every angle of the situation. People were breaking down the video frame by frame, analyzing body language, having lip readers verify exactly what was said. This wasn't speculation anymore. This was documented proof of organizational dysfunction playing out in real time for everyone to see. NFL legends started weighing in with their opinions. Michael Irvin posted about seeing the fire in Shedeur's eyes and knowing he's ready immediately. Shannon Sharpe kept hammering home the point that when a backup quarterback publicly shows up the starter like this, the organization has already made their decision about who should be playing. They're just figuring out the timing of the announcement. What's fascinating is how this story connects to larger themes about how NFL teams develop young quarterbacks. How many talented players have had their careers derailed or stunted because they ended up in the wrong situation with coaches who didn't believe in them or organizations that couldn't get out of their own way. How many times have we seen a quarterback struggle with one team, get traded or released, then immediately succeed somewhere else with better coaching and a more functional environment? Shedeur Sanders might be the latest example of that pattern if this trade goes through. Cleveland would be admitting they couldn't develop what New Orleans clearly believes is a franchise quarterback prospect, which would be embarrassing but might ultimately be what's best for Shedeur's career. The quarterback position in the NFL is so critical that these decisions reverberate through entire organizations. If Cleveland keeps Shedeur and he succeeds, Stefanski looks terrible for not playing him sooner, and his job security becomes even more precarious. If they trade Shedeur and he becomes a star in New Orleans, Stefanski's legacy in Cleveland gets permanently stained by another catastrophic organizational failure. If they keep starting Gabriel and the losses pile up, they waste another season and potentially lose the locker room completely. There's no good option left because they've backed themselves into a corner through months of questionable decision making. Behind closed doors, the pressure on Stefanski has reportedly reached critical levels. Jimmy Haslam is demanding explanations for why Gabriel keeps starting despite clear problems. Stefanski's apparently defending his choice by citing concerns about developmental timelines, consistency in practice, and veteran leadership, but those arguments lose credibility every single week when Gabriel's game performance doesn't match the practice reports. The disconnect between what the coaching staff says they're seeing and what actually happens on Sundays has become impossible to ignore or explain away. The practice facility has become a circus with national media camping outside looking for any scrap of information. Local reporters are working their sources trying to gauge which way the Browns are leaning. Former players are offering strong opinions on every platform available. YouTube creators are breaking down every practice throw and sideline interaction looking for clues about what might happen next. The entire sports media landscape is currently consumed by this story, and the intensity keeps building as the deadline approaches. What made that viral sideline moment so explosive wasn't just what Shedeur said, it was the look on his face. Not anger exactly, not simple frustration, but something more dangerous. Certainty, complete confidence in the inevitable outcome. That expression suggested he knows his time is coming, whether it's in Cleveland, New Orleans, or somewhere else. He's done being patient, done pretending he doesn't see what everyone else sees, done waiting for an opportunity that might never come if he doesn't force the issue. This represents everything wrong with how some organizations approach quarterback development. The dysfunction that wastes precious years of a player's career. The politics that prevent performance-based decisions. The coaching egos that won't allow admitting mistakes. The organizational paralysis that creates situations where talented players rot on benches while inferior options play. Shedeur Sanders deserves better than what Cleveland has given him, and if the Saints are offering him that better opportunity, maybe the embarrassment of trading him is exactly what the Browns deserve for mishandling this so badly. The next 72 hours leading up to the trade deadline are going to be absolutely fascinating. Every practice report will be analyzed for hints about Cleveland's decision. Every comment from coaches or players will be scrutinized for subtext. National reporters will be parked outside the facility waiting for breaking news. Insiders will be leaking information constantly. And through all that chaos, the Browns will have to decide whether to keep Shedeur Sanders and finally give him his shot, or send him to New Orleans in exchange for the Saints' generous offer. One thing is absolutely certain, regardless of how this resolves. The story isn't over. Whether Shedeur stays in Cleveland and eventually gets his opportunity, or whether he gets traded to New Orleans and becomes their franchise quarterback, the next chapter is going to be explosive. The decision Cleveland makes will likely determine Kevin Stefanski's future with the organization, will impact their playoff hopes, will affect how free agents view them as a destination, and will shape the narrative around this franchise for years to come. So here's what I need to know from you. Do you think the Browns should accept the Saints' offer and collect the draft capital, or should they keep Shedeur and finally start him? If you were Shedeur, would you want to stay in Cleveland and compete for the job? Or would you prefer the fresh start in New Orleans where you'd likely start immediately? What happens to Stefanski's job security no matter what they decide? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because this conversation is dominating the entire NFL right now. If you made it this far, you're clearly invested in seeing how this plays out, so hit that like button to help this story reach every football fan who needs to know what's happening with the Browns quarterback situation. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because this is the kind of NFL drama that unfolds rapidly and shapes careers and franchises. The future of Shedeur Sanders hangs in the balance. The Saints have dropped a bomb right in the middle of Cleveland's already chaotic season, and you absolutely do not want to miss what happens next.